Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney. I am a PM on the PowerShell team at Microsoft. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to be here today. I really want to keep this presentation fun, casual, and really tailored to whatever you all are going to find most helpful and interesting. So do feel free to use the chat. I have it up and I can see it right now to sort of ask questions, guide me along the way. If there's things that you want to hear, have questions about, or are interested about, I'm more than happy to spend time on that. Kind of the point of the session is to focus on PSResourceGet, show some of the differences and breaking changes between PowerShell Get and PSResourceGet. And the way I kind of thought about this session is doing more of like a skilling or learning focus and spending more time in the command line, demoing, showing kind of like how to use the module and less time sort of explaining the thought process around things. That being said, if you're more interested in exploration around design decisions and thought process, like more than happy to have that conversation. Just prompt me in that way and we can go that direction as well. With that, I think I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started with the deck. Let's see if I do this right. So as I mentioned, kind of the purpose of this session is to talk about the breaking changes from PowerShell Get to PSResourceGet. And what really prompted doing this session today is a really exciting announcement. Yeah, perfect. Okay, awesome. Very good. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Apologies again for the technical details and sorting all that. Hopefully we'll have a smoother sailing from here. All right, yeah, so what prompted this session was really very exciting news that we GA'd or became generally available, also known as the 1.0 release or the first major stable release of PSResourceGet. And we just had this GA like 2 weeks ago. I think it was on October 9th. So very new, fresh, hot off the press news. This module is now GA. I just pulled this screenshot from the PowerShell gallery. That's where you can go ahead and get this module like all other PowerShell modules. One thing I'll also point out from this screenshot that you'll notice is on the gallery, we added this tab. If you want to use PSResourceGet to start installing modules and you want to be able to use like the copy feature from the gallery UI, we did add a tab from that. We'll be kind of like monitoring usage over time and like potentially in the future could like flip these tabs. But for now, install PSResource tab is right there. But definitely check out this module. We're really excited about the 1.0 release. And that's why we're talking about it today, because we are finally GA. So as we get started talking about PSResourceGet, I wanted to use this slide. I used the slide back at PSConfEU, and I'm not going to spend as much time on it as I did there, but I thought it was key to just kind of set the stage and define a few terms before we kind of dig into more of the skilling focus of this session. So first of all, when we talk about PowerShell Get, if we talk about PowerShell Get is the module that we all know and love, shipped for the first time back in PowerShell 3, and it's the module that ships in PowerShell that allows you to do things like install modules, update modules, publish modules. Primarily, it's used with the PowerShell gallery, but it's also used with a number of other private repositories. And so PowerShell Get v1 is the version of PowerShell Get that ships in Windows PowerShell by default. PowerShell Get v2, specifically 2.2.5, is the latest stable version of PowerShell Get. And that's the version that ships in PowerShell, say 7.4, for example. When we talk about PowerShell Get v3, this sort of term first came into use a few years back when we were talking about this new project we were undergoing to rewrite PowerShell Get. We were going to rewrite this module because there were a number of really challenging underlying architectural issues that made it difficult to solve some really cumbersome, troublesome user experiences and bugs that we wanted to solve. And so we're undergoing this major rewrite, this major refresh of the module. And we originally coined this term, this project, as PowerShell Get 3, PowerShell Get V3. So if you've heard that term thrown around, that project eventually morphed into PSResourceGet. So what we talk about PSResourceGet today what was originally PowerShell Get V3. So it's the rewrite of PowerShell Get that still allows you to interact with the PowerShell gallery, manage your PowerShell packages, and also work with other PowerShell repositories, as we'll get into. So what happened to PowerShell Get V3? So V3 still exists, but what we've done with V3, which is still in preview state today, is ship what was the compatibility layer for PowerShell Get. So PowerShell Get V3 uses the same syntax as PowerShell Get V2, but it's a proxy function for calling PSResourceGet. I'm not going to spend a lot of time about that in today's session, but we can talk about it more if that's something of interest to people. That's still in preview today, but we're hoping to GA it in the PowerShell 7.5 timeframe. So that's, in other words, the next year. So when we kicked off the PowerShell Get V3 project, which eventually became PSResourceGet, we had a few main project goals, which you'll see come into play when we talk about sort of the breaking changes. And so that's why I just wanted to touch on this briefly. We wanted to create a more intuitive package manager. So we talked a lot about the principle of it just works, principle of least frustration. And so that was a design principle that we talked a lot about when we decided when we were going to make changes to the commandlet interface or behavioral changes. We wanted to address top customer issues, and this really plays into the previous one. There were some long-standing bug reports on GitHub that had tons of the upvotes and the thumbs that we really wanted to address why we were doing this, and also enable create an experience that we could, create a code base that we could more quickly iterate on. In other words, create a project where we could solve these issues in the future. We also wanted to allow for a smooth transition to a better experience. And this is where the decision to rename the module and the compatibility module kind of came into play. And then finally, we wanted to improve the maintainability of the code base. And for this, this is one of the reasons why we rewrote the module in C#. Our team is C# developers. This allowed us to simplify some things. And also we removed the dependencies of PowerShell Get. This played a lot into the maintainability as well. All right, so this session's all about breaking changes. So I think when we talk about breaking changes between PowerShell Get and PSResourceGet, there are two breaking changes that really stand out. First is the new module name. Like that's an obvious, huge breaking change. In fact, it's a new module now. So maybe it's not a breaking change in that sense, but it's related to the new commandlet names. So previously, we had install module. Now we have install PSResource. And I think I have this on the next slide. So you can kind of visualize it a little better. So for example, we had install module. We also had install script, install DSC resource. And now we've combined these into a single commandlet, install PS resource, that it can install any type of PS resource. So that could be a module, it could be a script, could be a DSC resource, or it could be another type of PS resource, like an arbitrary nupkick. And I can show a little bit more about that later on. So really big change is change in module name or commandlet name. So the commandlet interface is completely different. It's a little bit simplified. And so I think looking at these differences is a really key way to first understand what's going to be different about it. If we look kind of side by side at these commandlets, we can notice some of the other changes that came into play. So you'll say name, cool, we're the same. All right, version. This is another big change. We moved to version strings, version string ranges. And so previously you could specify a minimum version, a maximum version, and a required version. And these are all three separate commandlets. parameters. Today, they combine into a single version string, and I can show how to use that. Allow pre-release change to pre-release for simplification purposes. Repository, that's the same. Credential, it's the same. Scope's the same. This temporary path is a new feature we added. There are some environments where you need to specify the temporary path that the module is installed to, like that's used during the installation process. I feel like this is a pretty niche parameter that I wouldn't guess many people need to worry about. If you're curious, the specific scenario or the specific reason why we added this is actually for Azure Functions. They needed it. We added this trust repository switch. So if you know that for a particular commandlet call, you don't want to be prompted about repository trust, but you say you don't want to trust the gallery all up, why we added this. So that's a feature added, not a breaking change. Same with temporary path. Reinstall allows you, if you don't want to be prompted that a module has already been installed, you can use this reinstall. A big change is we changed from allow clobber to no clobber. So this is a flip in behavior. Previously, if there was a clobbering, so clobbering instance would be if you say you had a module that already was using a particular commandlet name. So like say I had a module that was installed and it was, I don't know, I'm bad at coming up with commandlets. Say I have a module installed that's get date, which I know is already in part of PowerShell, but say I have a commandlet already installed that's get date, and I have another module that also has a commandlet that's get date, and install a module. This would block the installation, and if I wanted to allow installation, I would need to use allow clobber. And install PSResource based on user feedback, we flipped the behavior. So if you know you don't want clobbering, you'd have to add the no clobber, but otherwise it's just gonna happen. With the skip dependency check, you can skip dependencies being installed. This is a really interesting one. So this is another flip in behavior, another example of a breaking change, kind of similar in a way to the clobber, but a little bit different. So in install module, we had what was called a publisher check. So we had this skip publisher check. And this was a Windows-only experience that kind of checked the signature. If it was consistent across multiple versions, it was this authenticode check. And this behavior was not consistent across platforms. And it didn't actually necessarily verify the publisher, but instead the authenticode signature. And so this is like a sort of a technical difference. So to be more clear, we changed it to be an opt-in parameter for authenticode check. There's a lot of reasons why the authenticode signature could actually change across package versions that wouldn't indicate a change in publisher. So we felt like this was giving both a false sense of security to users, but also like confusing behavior sometimes. So we made that change as well. So that's another flip in behavior. Now you have to opt into authenticode check versus previously it was opted in and you had to opt out. Pass through. Yeah, these are just the common parameters. So that's an example of just comparing install module to install PSResource, some of the breaking changes. I can't see the chat, so I'm just gonna pause out for a second. This is probably gonna cause all sorts of things. Okay, cool. So in addition to some breaking changes, we also added support for a whole lot more repositories. And I did want to highlight just a few features of PSResourceGet in case you're like wondering why you might make the change or like what might be some other changes to the module. So one of them is we really focused on more private repository support or support beyond just the PowerShell gallery. And this is important because it ties into our support of resources beyond just the standard PowerShell module, but also our support into arbitrary nutkegs and other types of binaries. And so some repositories we support now, NuGet.org, that was not previously supported. NuGet.server feeds, that was previously supported. For Azure Artifacts, we have way better and more consistent support for V2, and we previously didn't support V3. GitHub packages, the support is new. Artifactory, we did previously support V2. We now also support V3 feeds. We support mygit.org, and we support file share-based. There's hopefully support for more types of repositories coming in the future. There's also possible that, like, if you have a repository that's not listed on here, it's like possible it might just work. We've noticed that there's a lot of quirks or differences kind of between repository types. So if it's not working, please just open an issue. But these are the ones that we have testing against today. And I can show you that a little bit in our demo skilling portion. Another feature we added was credential persistence. And so this allows you to specify credentials at registration time for your PS repository. So this is a pretty big change. You can specify credentials at registration time, and it's going to be used in future calls. This is done through integration with the secret management module. I'll show how this is done in just a second. And if you're familiar with secret management already, we are considering adding this to PowerShell 7.5. Once again, PowerShell 7.5 is like the next version of PowerShell. So we'll ship a year from now. If you think this would be impactful or a bad idea, would love to hear from you. Something we're just kind of talking about right now. So, but credential persistence is a feature that we added and a change that wasn't previously available in PowerShell Get. One last change I'm going to mention is we added required resources and required resource file support in install PS resource. And so if you're ever familiar with the project PS Depends, really awesome, really popular community project, we borrowed a lot of inspiration from this project and also from many other programming languages, which use like required files or required.txt, required.json, requirements kind of files to build this. So this allows you to have like a requirements file either in the form of like a hash table, like a PSD1, or in the form of JSON. Specify the configuration of modules that you need for your project. And then you can just run this install call on the file name. This is an example of what the hash table looks like, but I'll show you what that would look like in a file as well. All right, so that's all I had in terms of slides. I wanted to spend a bunch of time just showing this stuff, getting into the terminal and doing some demo, showing some of the breaking changes and features. That is my plan. I am going to check. Sorry, I know this is causing infinite screen for you. I just am reading the chat really quick. So apologies for the infinite screen. Yeah, so Justin makes a great point. Current release doesn't support pulling dependencies for V3. We have an update, so that might change soon. With everything besides NuGet Gallery. NuGet Gallery is really tricky because the dependencies are based on .NET version. And so we're working on solving that right now, kind of design stage. I'm probably going to follow what NuGet CLI does, but hopefully we'll be able to support other other V3 dependencies soon. Alrighty. I am going to go to the terminal. All right, I'm assuming you all can still see my screen, but now I'm worried that you can't. I'm going to go back to the chat. Can someone let me know if screen share is fine? Okay, cool. All right, we'll do our favorite command. when we get a new module, get command, and see the command line interface on 1.0. So you can see what we talked about. All these commandlets end in PS resource now. Install PS resource, find PS resource, get PS resource, update PS resource. Big breaking change, right? So one other breaking change that I'm going to mention at this point in time that's going to be really useful for you if you're a PowerShell Get user is this function, import PS Get repository. And so what this, the kind of point of this function is that when we made the change from PowerShell Get to PSResourceGet, this caused a change in file location for the repository.xml file, which is where all the repository metadata is stored. In addition, there were some breaking changes into the exact specifics of the repository metadata that is stored. Because of this, we introduced a function that you just need to run one time when you first install the module, import PSGet repository. And what this is going to do is it's going to go into your PowerShell Get repository.xml, and it's going to take everything you have registered and it's going to register it into PSResourceGet. So that's the first thing I would do if you are a PowerShell Get user and you just want to immediately port over your old repositories. If you want to like piecemeal, figure it out later on, play with things, cool, that's awesome too. But this could be a really useful function if you're expecting your PowerShell Get repositories to just transfer over. I also ran get command on PowerShell Get just so you can see sort of like the difference in what the command line interface looks like. Again, this is version 2.2.5. This is the latest stable of PowerShell Get. So you can see there's just a lot more commandlets because it's like find command, find PSC resource, find module. They're all separate, right? And now they're in a single command. So that's really going to be the biggest sort of like immediate difference. So the next thing I like to do is get PS resource repository and just kind of show what we were talking about with the different repository types, because I think this is another kind of big key difference. So you can see I have PS gallery, got my NuGet gallery installed. I've got my local file share, got my GitHub packages, got an ADO public feed and an ADO private feed. And while we're at that, one thing I'm going to show you as well. If you haven't already and you want to remember the things or like have a reference point for the things we talk about today, I am going to go ahead and plug my own blog post just because it covers a lot of this stuff and has links to other things. I have made some updates to it since we released because I found some issues with it. But I'll also say that the docs are live, so check those out. But I particularly wanted to, let's see, if you go to the overview section, in the how-to section, supported repository configurations, I'm just going to plug this doc because it's really a great doc, super detailed, and it goes through each of the different supported repository types, what the limitations are. For example, wildcard search, like general wildcard search name, find PS resource name, wildcard, is not supported on NuGet.org. That's like a limitation on their API side. And so just so you know, like you're not going to be able to do that, right? So it's got the limitations, it's got how to register, like if you want to know what the URI is that you should use, and also like how to publish, because there's a little bit differences, like some use the API key, some use credentials, that sort of thing. So really great doc here. If you want to go through like all the different types. So I'm just going to plug this before I go back. So if you're like, in case we're moving kind of fast. So next thing I like to show is with register PS repository. If you ever are in a situation where you accidentally unregister the PowerShell gallery, I personally have done it before, like piping, like I'm like, oh, I want to like get rid of all these, like pipe to uninstall, something like that. All sorts of reasons. There is a parameter -PS gallery that will register PS gallery for you without needing to know the URI and specific information. And what's also really useful is that this is a change from PowerShell Get, but we added a force parameter to register PS resource repository. So if you have a repository that you know you want installed in a particular project or environment or scenario, and you don't want to like have to check to make sure it's installed, you can just go ahead, throw in the force parameter, and you're good to go. So cool. We know we have PowerShell Gallery registered. Next thing I'm going to show is we do get PS resource repository. Let's look at NuGet Gallery and then pipe it to FL, their full list. And you can see the properties of PS resource repositories. Little bit different, slight breaking change from PowerShell Get. The properties you're going to want to specify when you're registering are the name. This is still a friendly name, can be whatever you want. The URI, the big change being here that we now support v3 URIs. You can see the v3 here. Whether or not it's trusted, this was there before. But one of the new changes that we have is that we now have this notion of a priority with repositories. So previously in PowerShell Get, if I had a module, say my module, and I publish it to my local test environment, that's my local test repository, and I publish it to the PowerShell Gallery, and then say I go to install it, it's going to error out every time, right? And it's going to tell me, Sydney, you need to specify a repository. I can't know which repository you want me to install it from. And so that's where priorities come into play. So priorities tell PSResourceGet the order in which you want repositories to be searched for your modules and the order in which you want kind of them to be prioritized in terms of installing the module. So if we do an example here, if I do find module, I think this should work, my test. I think this, let's try this. The thing is, I kind of forget what the name of my module. Oh, I know why. Because I did find module. I was like, why didn't that work? It's literally the exact problem. Okay. Silly me. See, some of us still have the same issue with our muscle memory. Okay, cool. We love it. So I have this module, my test, and I have it registered in my ADO feed, my ADO public feed, and in my local feed. And you can see the order in which they're returned is based on priority. And then if they're all the same priority, it's going to return them based on alphabetical order. So priorities are going to default to 50 if you don't specify them at registration time, and they can range from 0 to 100. Now, if I were to run install PS resource, my test, it would install from EDO. And I know that because it's the first one returned in the find call. So that's kind of a useful feature to know and also a breaking change from PowerShell Get. Next thing is credential info. So this is what I was talking about being able to specify credential info at registration time. There's nothing here because NuGet Gallery is a public feed, so I didn't need to supply credential info. If I don't want to have credential persistence, I also, for private feeds, can specify it at every find, install, call, that sort of thing. And then finally, we have this new property called API version. This is going to, by default, guess what your API version is when you register if you don't specify it. It's going to guess, so it's like v3 based on v3. So this API version refers to basically like the NuGet API version. So the possible versions of this could be like a v2 feed, a v3 feed, and then we have some other specialized API versions as well. You should be able to tab complete through those if you're curious what they are. But that's kind of the other new property. I am going to show another example, which is get PSResource. If I do ADO, you can see that information. I was actually meaning to do that. So you could see a different example. The credential info, it just shows that I have credential info registered. It's not going to tell me anything about the credential. So don't worry, your credential is not going to be exposed there. And also, your credential is just a pointer to your credential. It's not the actual credential. So I think from here, I'm going to show how the credential persistence feature works. I'm looking at my notes, and I think that would be the most useful thing to show next. Credential persistence. It's dependent on this module, Microsoft PowerShell Secret Management. It's available in the PowerShell gallery. Check out the docs on it if you've never used it before. I'll just show this really quick. It's a module that's just an interface and allows you to have a simple way to access secrets. That's all it is. Doesn't do anything more than that. It plugs in to other existing extension vaults. So if I do get secret vault, oh gosh, you can see that I have 2 secret vaults registered. I have AZ Key Vault and Secret Store. Microsoft PowerShell Secret Store is a PowerShell module that is owned by the PowerShell team at Microsoft. It is a local secret vault. It works anywhere PowerShell does. It's built on the .NET cryptographic APIs. That's a really simple vault if you just want to get started and play around with it. If you already use Azure Key Vault, for example, or another vault, there's a ton of vault extensions out there already. I use Azure Key Vault as like another example of a remote vault that you can also use. Each vault handles its own sort of security, its own authentication, its own key management. Secret management is just an interface for interacting with the vaults. But if you do want to use the credential persistence feature, you are going to need the secret management module and at least one other secret vault registered. With PSResourceGet, we didn't want to reinvent a way of storing secrets, right? That would be a huge liability for us. So it's taking advantage of what PowerShell already has to offer. And secret management, if you do get secret info, you can see your secret metadata. So you can see I have like my ADO cred stored here. Cool. I have some other creds, my GitHub cred. You can see I was using all of this to for credential persistence feature in PSResourceGet. If we go back to this screen, I think I have my feed open. This is my feed that I just spun up for the purposes of this demo. This is just an Azure DevOps feed as an example. Many other feeds work very similarly if you don't use Azure DevOps. I published a couple of just like stub packages to this feed. I also use PowerShell Gallery as an upstream feed to get a package. You can connect to upstream sources. You can use this connect to feed to get your URI that you're going to need. And then to get your PAT, I just use this right here, personal access token. And that's all you're going to need to use this feature. If we go back to the terminal, you can see that I have my AZ ADO cred is what I'm going to use here. That's where I have it stored in Azure Key Vault. So if I do get secret AZ ADO cred, you'll see that my username is just my email. And then my password is my PAT. So that's all it is. And then if I do, let's see. Okay, cool. To set my credential info, if we go back up, oh, it's gone. So credential info is the parameter that you use. You can use it at registration time, or you can set it later using set PSResourceRepository, to set your credential persistence, you're going to need two things. And I like to just specify them as a hash table. So you're going to need your vault name and your secret name. So once again, you're not specifying your actual credential here. You're just specifying a pointer to your credential. So my vault name is AZKV. That's my Azure Key Vault. And then my secret name is AZADOCred. So I'm going to set that. And then I can do, let's say, a find PSResource. And you can see I was able to access my ADO feed, which is a private authenticated feed without needing to specify my credential. Super handy feature, hopefully not too difficult to use. One other new feature I did want to show two other features I will show really quick, and then I'm just going to give whatever time we have for questions, so I'll be really fast. If you want to install a package to a particular location, there is a way to do that. What you're going to do is save PSResource, use the save command, save PSResource on anything, so like Carbon. Then you're going to do include XML. Include XML is going to provide sort of like the same experience as if you were to install. And then path. Path is wherever you want it to be installed to, right? Cool. So that's really useful. Save PSResource, include XML, allows you to install to any location. And then the final thing I was going to show was required resource files. So let's see, hopefully this works. Okay, so if I have this required resource file, it's just test required resource file.psd1. It's going to prompt me all these times to say like, oh, do you trust this repository? If I want to do that, this is a place where I think the trust repository parameter is super useful because I know the exact version, the exact repository, the exact package name. I verified all those things. I trust this installation without trusting the whole gallery as a whole. So, trust repository, and then I can just install. These warnings I'm getting right here are that I already have it installed. If I wanted to, I can also specify the reinstall parameter, but I'm not going to do that there. If you're curious, this is what the required resource file looks like in a PSD1 form. You can see this is the module name, version, repository, pre-release, that sort of thing. So that's kind of just a new feature if you're looking for new features, but mostly focusing on the changes. One very last thing, I know I said I was done, but I was going to show. Let's try this. Okay, so if you're curious, I would go to about versions. This is another big change about how version strings work. So basically, instead of sorry, I'm going way too fast. I need to. Say I want to install a package between the version range 1 and 2. I would do 1. Here, I can show this. I would do install PSResource version 1.0. Right, so that's how you specify a minimum and maximum. You kind of just use those ranges. If you want to know more about exactly how package versioning works, check out the docs there. This is in install PSResource version. That's a really, really quick run through of what's different, what the new features are, everything like that. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then I'm going to see what I missed. If somebody wants to come up to the Q&A section, feel free to. I'm trying to go back and read the questions in the chat too. Okay, so there's a question about if repositories are still per user. They are. So the XML file is still per user. We are looking at like the feature of adding it to like system-wide repository files. That would be a little bit different. But yeah, I think hopefully there are, hopefully the force parameter helps a little bit too. There's some workarounds for that, but yeah, that feature is not available in this release. Yeah, and Justin brings up some of the like challenges with that as well. And Ryan has the tracking issue. Cool, thank you. Cool. I think that was the main comments in the chat. I'll see if anybody else has any other questions or anything like that. I know things probably went a little bit fast, but I appreciate everyone's feedback and everything like that.